No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and sharing. My name is Frank Salvato, and you're spending a few moments in Underground USA. Before we delve into this segment of America's Third Watch, I want to bring your attention to a crucial matter that unfolded during recent congressional testimony. It pertains to the Department of Veterans Affairs and the proposed legislation to restore gun ownership rights, Second Amendment rights, to veterans once they clear false claims of mental incompetence. This is a matter of significant importance and one that we all need to be aware of. This issue came to me courtesy of a brother of the badge, who are both now retired firefighters, via the Gun Owners of America's X feed. To say the least, it is disturbing. At best, it is a fundamental usurpation of the legislative branch by an executive branch bureaucrat under the shield of the Obama administration's Department of Justice. This blatant, unconstitutional declaration was recently made during congressional testimony. Give this a listen.
VA's testimony stated that if the Veterans Second Amendment Restoration Act is signed into law, and this is even more troubling, the VA could not comply because the VA states the Department of Justice, an executive branch agency, affirmed VA's interpretation of the Brady Act. So, is it the VA's position that the VA will not comply with an act of Congress based on another agency's interpretation of the law?
So the VA has always works to comply with all laws. We complied with the Brady Handgun Act when it was in effect. The law. So again, is the VA's position, because based on the statement they could not comply with the Restoration Act, the Veterans Second Amendment Restoration Act, is it your position that you will not comply with an act of law passed by Congress? Yes, sir. I guess based off of what you have in testimony, yes, sir.
That you would not comply?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm glad everybody hears that on the record, that the VA is going to refuse to comply with, regardless of what we actually pass here, including questions that Representative Self was just asking in view of the Chevron Act being passed. Mr. Chair, I have just a couple more questions, but I think that Mr. Friel has incriminated himself and the VA that they're going to have complete disregard for what we're going to do anyway. So
Mr. Friel, you're very well aware of how you just answered the congressman's question, correct?
Sir, as I said, it's in our testimony that we would have trouble complying with that law. As I said,
Mr. Friel, are you very well aware of how you answered the congressman's question?
Yes, sir.
Did you hear that? They're not going to comply. Given the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision that reversed the executive branch's abuse of regulatory powers under the guise of the Chevron defense, allowing the creation of regulations with the power of law, VA Deputy Director of Pension and Fiduciary Service Kevin Friel's declaration is nothing short of seditious. This seditious behavior evidences the executive branch's desire to usurp our constitutional system of government, which, in and of itself, is an act of insurrection. But this isn't the first time that the Biden administration, the executive branch under the Biden administration, has usurped our constitutional system of government. The Biden administration executive branch, and this goes for the Obama and Clinton administration executive branches as well, the Obama more than the Clinton, has routinely abused executive orders to execute end-arounds to both Congress and the U.S. Supreme Court. Perhaps the biggest usurpation comes in Biden's student loan forgiveness scheme, which, when honesty is employed, is nothing more than a vote bribery scheme and a grotesque and unconstitutional transfer of wealth. I say unconstitutional because the transfer of wealth is, in reality, a tax, and a tax that is being applied devoid of uniformity. The U.S. Supreme Court forbade the Biden administration from executing this vote bribery scheme, yet the Biden Department of Education, a failed department by any standard, continues to execute this unconstitutional transfer of wealth in defiance of the court's decision. And if we're to get into the habitual usurpation of the constitutional process by the Environmental Protection Agency, we quickly understand why the Supreme Court struck down the Chevron defense scheme. With the testimony admission by Mr. Frill that the VA will ignore the Supreme Court decision on Chevron and continue its transgression of the separation of powers, there can be no doubt that the Obama 2.0 Marxist puppet mastering of the Biden administration has a level of contempt for the U.S. Constitution that should categorize the whole of the administration as enemies of the state. The Biden administration's blatant attack on the U.S. Constitution, and remember, when you hear Biden administration, you must hear Obama 2.0. Its blatant attack on the U.S. Constitution and its correct categorization as enemy of the state should open discussions on the issue of treason. If our constitutional definition of treason centers on the levying of war against the country, read the Constitution, or in adhering to their enemies, read those who would usurp the constitutional system of government, giving them aid and comfort, then the charge of treason applies. The government's denial of a citizen's constitutional rights is, by definition, a high crime against the Constitution. Now, will Merrick Garland's Department of Justice apply the same prosecutorial viciousness to those committing true insurrection against our nation? I mean, given how they treated the January 6th protesters, whose only crime was exercising their First Amendment rights to redress the government. When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station, WGUL AM 860 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
When someone is having a stroke, every minute counts. Just as putting out a fire quickly can stop it from spreading, treating a stroke quickly can reduce damage to the brain. The clock begins ticking as soon as you spot the signs of a stroke, because some treatments can only be used if the patient reaches the hospital in the first 3 hours after symptoms appear. So don't wait. Call 911 right away and get the person to a hospital immediately, even if the symptoms go away. If you think someone is having a stroke, remember the word FAST. F is for face. Ask the person to smile and check whether one side of their face is drooping. A is for arms. Have the person raise both arms and see if one arm drifts downwards. S is for speech. Ask the person to repeat a short phrase and notice if their words sound slurred. And finally, T is for time. If you spot any of these signs, call 911 right away to get the person to a hospital fast. Strokes are medical emergencies. The sooner a patient gets treatment, the better their chance of a good recovery.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
Well, you know, I'm sure you saw most, if not all, of the big boy press conference, as everybody's sort of referring to it. But what's your take on what we saw with Joe Biden yesterday?
Oh, I'm just too worried about what George Clooney has to say. You know, the fact that a reporter included him along with Democrat and world leaders in a question is stunning. Who the hell is George Clooney that his opinion on what's going on should matter to any American? He may be a so-so actor, but he's not a political brain trust. You know, if anything, he's a dupe. he went out before the debate and helped raise tens of millions of dollars for Joe Biden, and then immediately after the debate started being very worried about Joe's cognitive decline. We have to do something. His cognitive, where have you been the last 3.5 years, you elitist?
Exactly.
I'm not going to go there, but.
Yeah. No, but you're right. I mean, even hosts on MSNBC are like, well, Biden can't go another 4 years, but they just came to this conclusion. Well, of course not. They've known this, but now this is now the acceptable thing, I guess. Otherwise, they all have to, this disconnect that they've had to have been lying to themselves for so long. I just don't buy any of it.
Well, it includes Chuck Todd. That's his bizarre word vomit after the debate about when did this happen? When did this happen? How did I can't even believe he ran for office in the first place. How incredibly disingenuous. This guy spent 3.5 years defending everything Biden does, including talking to all of his inner circle. And now he was surprised he ran for president in the first place. The American people we can't put up with this anymore. And this goes well beyond Joe Biden. The media in this country is a disgrace to a free nation. They just are. They are elitist, globalist, agendized, self-important non-potentates who, like I said, word vomit to the American people about what they feel. I don't care what Chuck Todd feels or any of the other miscreants over at that network or MSNBC or CNN. Do this. Take your opinion, stick it, and just report the news.
Yeah, I think you're right. And in fact, CNN, evidently, they're laying off a small amount of people, but it's 100 people, about 3% evidently of their total workforce. But evidently in some aim to try to get rid of some of the opinion sections and this kind of stuff, although so much of it is opinion. But they are trying to do something. It's very interesting to watch them try to do it, but I don't know how successful they'll be.
Yeah, they're getting rid of 100 people in an attempt to centralize the newsroom to one newsroom, the newsroom. I guess that's to make sure that the producers and the editors that work for CNN have total control over what's said on that network. Which is very, 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 very Nazi of them. When we come to the point as an American people where the rubric for being a success in the office of the President of the United States is making an acceptable performance at a press conference, we're in trouble. That's a position where you should be the ultimate pro at standing in front of a television camera or a microphone and always impressing with your performance. But now we're just saying, well, he didn't mumble through it, or he didn't mumble as much, or he only had 14 gaffes, or he only went slack-jawed for 5 minutes. This is not an acceptable performance. This is an awful performance for someone who's supposed to be the leader of the free world, especially with the gaffes that he made. He consults the commander-in-chief? Who's the commander-in-chief then? Or is he talking to himself in the mirror?
I know. We're laughing a little bit about it, but this is so serious. The rest of the world. And one of the questions was even, does your decline, which I thought was an interesting choice of words, does your decline, hurt the status of the United States basically in the world? He took umbrage at that, but that was just out in the open. You have a decline.
Yeah, he's not been a fan of his little rascal ramp.
It was really kind of interesting to me, Frank, because Ezra Klein, who's a New York Times columnist, kind of ran into a buzzsaw on a podcast earlier this week when he reported that behind the scenes, some of these different Democrats that he talks to don't really believe that Donald Trump is the existential threat to democracy that he's made out to be. And the podcast host kind of got a little upset about the whole thing, I guess. because that is supposed to be the narrative, that Donald Trump is that existential threat.
Yeah, when you work for a publication that actually ran interference for Stalin and Hitler, you've got to toe the line as dictated from the editorial board. Otherwise, you're an antichrist. So it doesn't surprise me he ran into the buzzsaw, but it does expose the big lie that all they have to run on is demonizing Donald Trump. You know, whether you like Donald Trump or you don't like Donald Trump, it's very hard to make a successful argument that it's better to have Joe Biden and the Democrats in charge as opposed to what was in existence 3.5 years ago. It's impossible to make that argument. And anybody who's still making that argument is delusional to the point of being able to understand Joe Biden at any given moment. If you're looking for the American dream, if you're trying to start a business, if you're trying to buy a home, if you're trying to stay above water because you have to go to the grocery store or fill up your gas tank, you feel the pain that the ridiculous Marxist policies of the Biden administration and Obama 2.0, and make no mistake, the same people who were running the Obama White House are running the Biden White House. You have to be a mental midget, and I apologize to all midgets to not see that and understand it. There's 19 people in the inner circle that are holdovers from the Obama era. Obama has been puppet stringing this the entire time, whether there's a gulf between Biden and Obama or not. His people never left Washington, and Biden was too lazy to bring his own people in. So these are the ramifications of a purely Marxist and Islamo-fascist sympathetic regime that was in for 8 years and infected our system of government. You're going to need more than just 4 years of Donald Trump to purge it. And it has to be a vicious purge. We have to go and dismantle the deep state. And the deep state is not going to care for that at all.
No, it's not. In fact, I don't think there's any love lost between Obama and Biden. I never got the impression that they were really two peas in a pod. But in terms of and we heard about this meeting between Pelosi and Obama, if they really are able to oust Biden, whoever they kind of get is going to be the next figurehead, maybe just a figurehead who can do a better press conference, but certainly not somebody who is, I'm now in charge, I'm the president.
Oh, absolutely. That's why they don't care if Biden drops out or not. Yeah, there's a feud between the two. The first ladies don't care for each other, but how could they? They're two peas in a pod. They're very self-centered. They're very jaded, and they're very hateful, and they're willing to do anything to hang on to power and influence. So of course they would dislike one another, and that caused a rift between Barack and Joe, because both of them get led around by their noses. But yes, Obama 2.0, the powers that be, they would love to have another moron in the Oval Office so they can just keep pushing their agenda and blaming the puppet.
Sure.
This is why this push to get rid of Biden right now, Republicans shouldn't be on board with that. Let's make them play by their rules. Their DNC organization established the rules about how the delegates are awarded. They set the rules for the primaries. Make them live it's an Alinsky rule, by the way. Exactly. How long have I been saying?
You're exactly right about that. Make the other side play by their rule book, basically.
Yeah, and we haven't been using that playbook, a successful playbook. We haven't been using that against them the way they use it against us. So let's do it for once. No. You got to stick with Biden. And then we have to destroy the Democrat Party on all levels in November. And right now, job one is, there's two jobs that are job one. Figure that one out. You've got to be able to make sure that you defeat Joe Biden by more than 10 percentage points on Election Day, so they can't steal the election. And you've got to start working to make sure that this momentum, it translate the down ticket races, because without a super majority, not a lot's going to get done, even if Trump wins.
Well, let's just say that they do switch out Biden. How does that change the dynamic for Donald Trump campaigning? To me, it doesn't change the circumstances or the things that are wrong right now, but it's just he would have a much more energetic opponent that would be able to try to hammer home some of these false narratives.
Well, this is one of the reasons that I've been advocating the entire time that he needs to run on his record as juxtaposed to the Democrats' record. He doesn't need to run against Joe Biden. He needs to run against the far left and Democrat policies. They've been a complete failure. They've had significant control the entire time Biden has been in office. So it's really time that they start running on the merits. Start asking people how their wallets feel. Start asking them how their freedom feels. Start asking them how they enjoy being locked down during COVID under Joe Biden. And start reminding people how horrible it has been for the last 3.5 years. Because right now we're frogs in very, very warm water that's starting to bubble, and people aren't paying attention to the fact that it's starting to boil.
Indeed. And I would think too, Frank, that so many people out there are unhappy with the way things are right now. In other words, the Democrats really can't run on 4 more years. You hear them chant that. That's the party faithful. But nobody out there across the highways and byways is thinking, wow, we can get another 4 years of this, even with Gavin Newsom or even Kamala Harris. Oh, sign me up. I don't think people really think like that.
It's the 29% that are quite all right with fundamental change that can make an argument in defense of socialism, democratic socialism, and Marxism that are what we should be worried about. Our education system has been hijacked by the very far left, and they've instilled into the young demographic over the last 25, 30 years that, maybe Marxism isn't all that bad if everybody's equal. Well, when everybody's equal and the outcome is the same for anybody, there's no motivation to be innovative. And we have to start being honest about that. And that's why I keep saying we've got to talk about politics and religion with our friends, families, and acquaintances. It must happen. Do it with facts and not calling names and being jaded and angry, but you got to talk about it. Otherwise, because the schools aren't going to do it. Academia's not going to take the lead in this at all, ever, because they're part of it.
And we got to do it now because Thanksgiving is after the election. So, yeah. I mean, you gotta get in there and make this thing happen before the regular family get-togethers.
Give Uncle Murray a call before Thanksgiving, and have a talk with him beforehand. He'll thank you for calling, and then you can get into it on the phone. And this way, when it's time to go away, you don't actually have to be there.
I love it. Absolutely love it.
If you like the podcast, please rate it and comment if your platform lets you. Go over to undergroundusa.com and subscribe to the Substack, and pick up your copy of Nullification, available on Amazon. But more importantly, talk to your friends, family, colleagues, and acquaintances about politics and religion. Do it calmly and employ facts over emotion. You'll be surprised how much you have in common with a great many of those you talk to. It's something we can all do to preserve the Republic. My name is Frank Salvato, and you're listening to Underground USA.
I'm Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. My main focus was to be the best I could be on the basketball court. The first inkling that something was wrong was I started to notice that I couldn't do things without losing my breath. I still didn't think that it was anything serious until I couldn't make it through the airport. Every 20 or 30 yards, I had to sit down and get my breath. Every physical exertion seemed to exhaust me. I knew something was wrong, and then I went to a baseball game with some friends, and I couldn't deal with any exertion. And finally, I went from the baseball game to the hospital where I was diagnosed with AFib. When I first noticed symptoms, I should have gone to the doctor and told him what was happening. Instead, I tried to let it pass. It took me listening to the cardiologist to help me get it straight as to what I needed to do. AFib increases the risk of stroke about 5 times. So you need to go and find out what's happening. You need to know all of it, and you need to deal with it. It took me a while before I got wise. The No Time to Wait campaign expresses the urgency that people need to find out if they have AFib. I want my experience to help others understand the symptoms of atrial fibrillation. I didn't pay attention to my symptoms, which kept coming and going, or discuss them with my doctor. Experiencing irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain, or any other AFib symptoms, including shortness of breath, fatigue, or lightheadedness, you should talk to your doctor. When it comes to your health, this is no time to wait.